of the Young Terps podcast. Ahmed Yafir and Mason Viner. Ahmed, you're live from the Music City. Been at both of the bowl practices. What have you been seeing from the Terps?
Yeah, it's been good to see, good to get down here. Obviously, you got a chance to go. I believe it was Ensworth High School on Wednesday and Thursday. Lot of the same. I think the biggest things was kind of the new additions. Obviously, seeing Lloyd Urban practicing. Neo Avery was able to make the trip, but he wasn't working out in pads or anything like that. Was working off on the sides. Saw Kiari James with GM Mercy Falacy watching practice as well, but. In terms of all in the field, starting O line looked very much the same. Kyle Long replacing Amelia Moran was really the only main change there. Andre Roy hasn't been practicing, so Marcus Dumerville was stepping in at right tackle through the reps I saw through the open portion. And again, just got a chance to see. I think obviously Neil O'Donnell, former Terp, was down there at Wednesday, so that was good to see. And then on Thursday, not a huge Thunder report. Made a premium note for subscribers on a transfer that was set to join the team yesterday, but free tidbit. MJ Moore started taking his first reps of practice yesterday, so that was good to see. But practice number 2 is in the books, and next time they put the pads on will be the bowl game.
Yeah, and it will be a couple of longtime Terps in their final practice. Jay Sean Jones, obviously, will play his final game with Maryland. It looks like him and Bo Braid opting back in with Maryland after looking like he would opt out. Terps overall with strong set of players that have contributed throughout the season. Not too many opt-outs on Maryland's end.
Yeah, I mean, I see, Jaquan Shepard. I think he was another guy that was kind of, wasn't sure if he was going to play. But I know Loxley said last Tuesday, that he was going to play, and he was working there at cornerback. Lionel Whitaker, Perry Fisher, they were both working there. It was pretty cool to see him Wednesday. And it's not the first time we've seen it, but, the right at the end of one-on-ones before they went into 11-on-11, Glenn Miller laid a nice big hit on Ty Felton, and both sides were kind of tripping a little bit and kind of got him fired up going into bowl prep. Wednesday's practice, the weather was great yesterday. It was a little bit chilly, but yeah, so I mean, again, I noted it on the site, but it seems like a lot of the guys, D linemen, you saw Jordan Phillips, Tommy Kimbasote, Tyze Johnson. So seems like, availability wise, Maryland should be in a good spot. Handful of guys that have been inactive, so noted that on the site for subscribers there.
Yeah, and let's talk about the opponent, the Auburn Tigers. Obviously a big chance for the Terps to pick up an SEC win. Auburn really up and down season, kind of similar to, a Mike Loxley trajectory, close games against both Georgia and obviously the heartbreaker on the plains against Alabama. Also losses to New Mexico State and a handful of others that just had Auburn shaking their head this season.
Yeah, absolutely. Like you said, I think the New Mexico State loss the following week going into the Alabama game, and the 4th and 31, the famous touchdown pass at this point from Jalen Milroe. It feels like very close to could have been a potential signature win or two for Hugh Freeze in year 1 there. But again, it feels like this Auburn team, just offensively really starts with kind of one player. And it seems like the defense has a lot of guys that, could be playing on Sundays, but a few of them opted out. DJ James being one of DJ James should be playing. But again, I think a couple of those guys should be able to kind of step in. Eugene DeSanti was a guy that Maryland targeted pretty hard out of the portal. He's kind of leading that defense there. So, DJ James, Nehemiah Pritchett, and Marcus Harris, all 3 of those D linemen, all opt-outs for Auburn. So all 3 of those are pretty big. But like you said, this Auburn team felt like it showed some promise in year 1 and under Hugh Freeze.
Yeah, and really the biggest story for Auburn, the quarterback Peyton Thorne, and the offense really struggling at times to move the ball. One of the lower pass attempts per game team in the country. Obviously, the Terps will see a lot of running offense, a team that, if Maryland is locked in, if they're ready to go, ultimately probably will see a low-scoring game.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really expect this Auburn offense to really scare. I mean, I don't think Peyton Thorne really scares anybody. I did a Q&A with one of the Auburn sites, Warbogle. Then he was like, hey, be a little testy, have fun with it. So I said, cool, and pretty much explicitly said Peyton Thorne is no threat and scares nobody, because I think that's kind of the case. I think if you kind of look at Auburn, obviously it starts with Jarquez Hunter. And if it is going to be in the passing game, Everaldo Fairweather, who another guy Maryland targeted pretty hard out of the portal, had to think on it, but believe he was the only portal tight end that Maryland hosted last offseason before he took his official visit to Auburn and landed there. So he's kind of the big one. But again, he hasn't had any true breakout games. It just kind of feels like even with the outgoing departures for a very thin Auburn wide receiver room now, Fairweather is kind of that priority to watching the passing game. But again, I think it all starts with kind of stopping Auburn on the run. So again, it kind of points back to Maryland, just their availability overall right now. You kind of like their chances of being able to limit, the big plays or the chunk plays essentially, like they've shown, going against, Travion Henderson and Blake Corum and the Penn State running backs through the season.
Yeah, that will be the stories if Maryland can stop the run. Team stats on the year for Auburn, Ahmed, here's an offense that doesn't really scare anybody. 157.1 yards passing per game. That's 231st in the FBS this season. 198.4 yards on the ground per game for Auburn. All that ties into, they actually averaged 27 points per game on the season, but it has not been pretty at times. 14 points against Cal early in the season. That kind of continued late, where they only put up 10 against New Mexico State. And probably what was one of college football's biggest upsets, the lowest funded program in the FBS goes to Auburn and wins the week before the Iron Bowl. But then again, 7-point games against Ole Miss, 7-point, the loss to Alabama, that they really should have won that game, the loss to Georgia. So a team, again, I draw a lot of comparisons. Really, the only one that Maryland didn't have was the really awful loss at the end of the season, and both of these teams would have been 7-5. But a team that can compete with the big dogs, but ultimately you can see that they're a quarterback away, probably a couple of offensive linemen. You mentioned the receivers. There's just a lot of holes on this Auburn offense.
Yeah, again, I think that's kind of why I feel pretty confident. But again, I think that this has makings or potential of having just a really ugly offensive game. Yeah, I think both sides. I probably have more confidence in Maryland's offense being able to exploit Auburn's defense than Auburn's offense exploiting Maryland's defense. But again, I think if Maryland's able to limit Jarquez Hunter, which is not an easy thing to do. I mean, he's been able to make that big plays this year and really been the spark for them for that offense. So I just think, again, Maryland's been able to show some things, from Ruben Hippolyte, obviously, no Jay-Sean Barham, which is a huge loss, but get a chance to see some younger guys and kind of fill that void there.
Yeah, let's talk about the Terps. Offensively, obviously, the big question will be the quarterback. Ahmed, what's your take so far on who will be taking most of the snaps
Yeah.
on Saturday?
I think it's going to be Billy Edwards that's going to take that first snap. Obviously, I mentioned, had heard some good things on Cam Edge yesterday at practice. So posted that again for subscribers. But I think predominantly, I mean, even when Talia, when he said after the Rutgers game that he was planning to play in the bowl game, and someone asked me privately, and I said, even still, I expect Leah to maybe play a half and Billy and Cam to kind of split it up. I mean, Loxley's just routinely and consistently been so just consistent really with the fact that the bowl game is a preview for the next season. So it was just kind of the perfect opportunity to do so. So I think it's going to you're going to see large doses of Billy Edwards, Cam Edge. Again, I posted this on the site, and I think Billy Edwards, I think a lot of people look at him as a runner, but inside, whenever you talk to him, it seems there's just a lot of trust in Billy to make the right plays, to do the do the right things within the offense. And then Cam, he's made his strides, obviously, and this is going to really be his first chance to show it on a larger scale. There's a lot of confidence in him and the way he kind of grasps, he picks up things, and kind of the way he carries himself off the field. It's kind of all the makings of potentially someone that can be successful at the college level. So I think how they fare is going to be really interesting. I think Billy Edwards, obviously, you look at him and it opens up the run packages, and it'll be really interesting to see, what he and Roman Hemby, what they do change in the backfield to kind of maybe, kind of capture both of their strengths a little bit, kind of maybe mitigate what the offensive line, what they're kind of able to do and run blocking there. But again, I think both of those guys are going to be there. Whether we see Jaden Surrey, Cam Edge, I'm not as confident, but again, won't rule it out. You never know over a 60-minute stretch. But I really think this is going to be a chance for both these young quarterbacks to just showcase what they got.
Yeah, and on that, you also will see two fully healthy 100% quarterbacks. Leah did get dinged up as pretty much always, as we've seen. He takes a lot of hits the way he plays the game. So you'll see two guys ready to go that haven't taken necessarily the beating over the last couple of months that we've seen. Billy, I kind of, echo your points on it. I think that we really haven't seen what he's got fully yet. He did win that game in Indiana last year when he came in when Leo was hurt. He then came back the next week in Northwestern. So a guy that, it's not completely something new to him. Obviously, with Kevin Sumlin and Josh Gaddis, it is something more or less new, other than I guess the turtle push, if you want to call it that we've seen him put up some numbers on. I am really excited to see Cam Edge. Cam Edge is a player when he was at DeMatha, and then he finished up at Smyrna in Delaware, which is a great football program up that way. He was on that kind of 4-star cusp, but and COVID really kind of derailed right when he would have been really, I think, Ahmed, you know more about this than I do, but really when he would have been truly rated as a player. He was kind of in that weird sense where there wasn't a lot of scouting, but DeMatha and Smyrna both kept playing football through that time. I'm really excited to see kind of what he can do when the game is a game. He did show, in the Towson game earlier this year, but I think he threw the ball maybe somewhere between 5 and 7 times in that game. So I'm excited to see what he has in that situation, and ultimately kind of what some of these younger receivers can do, who we're going to start to see next year. If you watch Maryland in the last 2 bowl games, you're going to see everybody in this game. Guys like, Ryan Manning that have been practicing for a long time. What will we see from, maybe Braden Wazowski in some wide receiver situations, or maybe out of the backfield? Some of those things we saw maybe for a handful of plays throughout the year, but they're next. And that's what Loxley really loves to do with these bowl games.
Yeah, and I think, in the wide receiver room, I think Shalik Knox is probably the guy where I think they're gonna give him a lot of targets, try and get him involved in the offense. Really, Loxley touched on it. I think it was last week, but really see what he can do. But it's felt like kind of ever since the season ended, and you could see it at the end of the regular season, the last 3-4 games. You got a chance to see Shalik in the game a lot more. Sure, the ball wasn't really coming his way. It wasn't, it was just very sporadic, but you saw him trying to get involved more. Maryland will have to replace Deshaun Jones next year. Obviously, Ty Felton, Caden Prather, both those guys are still expected to come back, even with the new 2-time transfer rule. Caden Prather, I wouldn't worry about that right now. So again, I think, Octavian Smith, he's another guy where we've seen flashes. He had the touchdown, obviously, against NC State last year in the bowl game. I think it was a 31-yard touchdown off a screen pass against Michigan State. But, we've only seen flashes of him and Braden Wazowski, like you mentioned. He's taken over in the return game, but, what can he do now in the receiving game? So I think a lot of these guys will kind of be able to step up. Dylan Wade in the tight end room. I would even throw Preston Howard in there. I think, I know Preston started 10 games, and I think fans started to see it at the spring game. Just a very fluid athlete who, when he enrolled, it was never, a question of how good he was going to be. It was about learning the intricacies of the position and just kind of acclimating himself within that new role. Obviously, he was a guy who used to play tight end, youth level, but when he went to McDonough, switched to that quarterback role. But so again, I think he's kind of started to come on a little bit this year. But I think, with Corey Dyke just gone, he's going to be that primary receiving threat in that tight end room next year. Dylan Wade has kind of been the lone man standing right now, and he's kind of that priority number 2 behind Howard right there. So I'm also pretty excited to see what both those guys do. I think it should be pretty good. I will be interested to see just how the offensive line, how those rotations goes, because to be honest, I don't know. I have a feel for how that's going to go. But Loxley, we've seen it in years through this season. A lot of changes, even mid drive, things like that. So in an effort to having to replace all 5 starters now for 2024, it'll be interesting to see how the bowl game is utilized to help bring some of these younger guys along.
Yeah, the biggest one for me is, do we see Walker at center? Do we see any reps from him? Does a guy like, does a Chris Love get any time for Maryland? Does any of these guys that are that they've pulled out that we maybe haven't seen really at all? Andre Roy would have been the main focus if it looked like he was going to go at this point. It does not. So he would have obviously been at that tackle spot, position for a starting role next year. But there's so many guys that I think the fans have been clamoring for. Doomerville being, the main one there that we haven't seen really at all this season that you may see. Ahmed, Terps, 6.5 point underdog going into the game. Let's start off though with some breakout players. Who are your breakout guys for Maryland in the game?
Yeah, I mentioned it right. The Shalik Knox, I think that's kind of the main guy I'm kind of looking for on offense. Dylan Wade is another guy I like there. But on the defense side of the ball, you look at kind of cornerback room. Lionel Whitaker, I think we were able to see some flashes with him. I think, he's had some spurts this year, but I think he was able to flash a lot as a true freshman. But how does he look against a large sample size? And then again, Perry Fisher, a guy who played defensive back in high school, but primarily was a quarterback, was signed as a wide receiver, and then moved to corner. The athleticism, the intangibles were always there, and there was something that they really liked about him was just his experience as a quarterback would kind of give him a different IQ, different understanding, defensive mentality as a DB now. So it was all very similar to what Preston Howard in that year one, where it was about just kind of learning the position and kind of getting acclimated to what's kind of expected in that role. Much can be said to the same about Perry Fisher. So I think he's going to be a guy where it's going to be interesting to see how he looks. But I like him. I like his upside as well, and I think we see a lot of him as well.
Yeah, my guys on that side. Dylan Wade was going to be my pick, but I'll take Zizmansky as my pick. I think that I wouldn't be surprised somehow if he catches like a 1-yard touchdown pass in this game. Maybe that Shane Greeley play. I was going to pick Greeley as my guy, but this will be his last game for Maryland. I think that he gets in the end zone somehow in this game one last time. I would not be surprised at all if the Terps pull out that play. On the defensive side of the ball, I mean, Perry Fisher's been my guy. So obviously we picked the same guys because we do the show together. But I will go ahead and I think Dylan Gooden's going to get some run in this game off the edge. I think that this is the kind of game where a guy that's kind of struggled a little bit. I know we've talked about on this show to like get fully acclimated to the speed of college football and to where he needs to be weight wise. And obviously he's going to be a guy that I feel like will contribute to the program in the long term. But this is the kind of game where Loxley's going to want to get a lot of guys, get their feet wet. This is what big time college football is like. This is what an SEC opponent's like. So those are my guys for it. Ahmed, game pick. I already mentioned it. Maryland, 6.5-point underdog. Not many player props out there. Actually, no Maryland receiving player props on DraftKings as of this morning.
Yeah, I was a little bit surprising. I'm going to go Maryland with the points. I'm not confident that Auburn's gonna. Again, I think Maryland's still explosive enough, even with two young quarterbacks or two a little bit more inexperienced quarterbacks in Talia, obviously. I think Maryland has enough of these skill players to be able to find the end zone, be able to find something. So I think they'll be able to keep it. And we'll see. I haven't decided on the over under yet, but I'm not sure it's a lock either way just yet.
Yeah, that number is at 47.5 for this game. Terps 210 on the money line as well. Auburn 258 on the money line as the favorite in this game. I also like the Terps. Give me the points. I'll take the under. I see it somewhere in that like 23-17, 20-17 sort of game. I think Maryland's defense is a really, really good matchup in this game for what Auburn's been able to do, trying to run the ball. If you just look at what Maryland was able to do against the run at points this season, there isn't a Blake Corum type player on the Auburn side, in my opinion. There's definitely not an offensive line like a Michigan or Ohio State offensive line that's going to wear you down. I think the Terps, you start to see those guys, that front seven, starting to look real good for next year. They probably still want to jump in the portal, maybe add an edge piece to it, but I really like what the Terps have on the front seven going into next year. And look, I'm looking forward to seeing a lot of the new faces, a different quarterback. I think that this is just going to be a really, really good performance. And look, you always got to look at it this way too. It means a lot to guys that are on Maryland to beat a team like Auburn, to beat an SEC opponent. That means a lot to this fan base. I'm not sure the same goes on the other side, playing a team that's won a national championship in the last 15 years.
Yeah, I think that's completely fair. I think when you talk about the young players again, I know we've talked about a couple of them. I think, do more. I think it'll be kind of interesting to see and just kind of have a fair in the bigger roles. Daniel Wingate, Mike Harris, I think with those guys, kind of interested to see just kind of how they fare. And again, like you said, just kind of be able to wrap up the 2023 season and kind of be able to get a lot of these young guys. It'll be interesting, kind of. Sad. It'll be weird to see, and I kind of acknowledge that Jashawn Jones, Panajay Gote, 6 years is still this will be it for him. But after Thursday's practice, their practice career is officially in the rearview mirror. So 1 o'clock Nashville time, 2 p.m. Eastern. We shall see how they fare.
Yeah, Ahmed will have all the coverage on Inside the Black and Gold live from Nashville and the Music City Bowl. We'll be back here on the podcast as always to break it down, and then more fully into basketball season on this side with a huge game coming into College Park on Tuesday night when the number one team in the country, the Purdue Boilermakers, take on the Terps.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. Obviously, coming off a 22-point win against Coppin State last night without Jameer Young, I think that was a pretty big storyline there. The opportunity for Julian Reese to kind of bounce back there, but whether Jameer is available for Purdue. It will be a very big storyline. Obviously, him battling back from the flu there. So, yeah, chance for Maryland to really right the ship and kind of cement some of this positive momentum that a lot of fans are starting to see, but waiting to see whether fully materializes yet. So, January 2nd, stay tuned.
Yeah, we'll have all the coverage here on the podcast. Make sure to like this podcast where you get it, subscribe to it where you can. Make sure to subscribe to InsideTheBlackandGold.net for all of your Maryland coverage. And as always, Happy New Year. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening.